thousands. The Silk Road, stretching thousands of miles across Asia, was not a single route but an intricate network of trade paths that connected China with the Mediterranean, weaving together diverse cultures, economies, and empires. Its origins can be traced back to the Han Dynasty, around the 2nd century BCE, when Chinese rulers recognized the immense value of silk, both as a commodity and as a symbol of prestige. The Chinese began sending caravans carrying silk westward, aiming to establish commercial ties with distant lands, including Central Asia, India, and eventually the Roman Empire. These early trade missions were not merely about exchanging goods. They were ventures into unknown territories confronting harsh deserts, treacherous mountain passes, and unpredictable weather. Along the way, merchants and explorers encountered different peoples, languages, and customs, planting the seeds of cultural exchange that would flourish over centuries. Beyond trade, the Silk Road became a conduit for knowledge, transporting innovations, religious beliefs, artistic traditions, and scientific discoveries across continents. From Chinese silk and porcelain to Persian carpets and Roman glassware, the exchange of material goods mirrored the equally important flow of ideas, shaping the development of civilizations in a way no single empire could achieve alone. By linking East and West, the Silk Road laid the groundwork for global interconnectedness, demonstrating how commerce, curiosity, and human ingenuity could transcend geography and politics. In the earliest days of the Silk Road, trade was dominated by Chinese silk, a material so coveted that it became synonymous with luxury and wealth throughout the known world. Chinese merchants transported their silk in small caravans, navigating deserts, high mountain passes, and dangerous river crossings. These journeys were fraught with peril. Merchants faced extreme temperatures, scarcity of food and water, and the constant threat of bandits. Despite these risks, the rewards were immense. In return for silk, Chinese traders acquired horses from Central Asia, precious stones from India, spices from the Arabian Peninsula, and glassware and jewelry from the Mediterranean. This exchange of goods was not one way. Instead, it created a network where each region contributed unique commodities, fostering economic interdependence across vast distances. Over time, the Silk Road also enabled the transfer of techniques and knowledge. For instance, silk weaving techniques, once jealously guarded in China, slowly influenced textile production in other regions, even inspiring imitation silk in Central Asia and the Middle East. Similarly, artisans, merchants, and scholars traveling along these routes facilitated the exchange of pottery designs, metalworking skills, and artistic motifs, spreading creativity and innovation across continents. The movement of goods was deeply intertwined with the movement of culture, religion, and language. Buddhist monks, Christian missionaries, and Islamic scholars traveled along these routes, establishing monasteries, libraries, and schools in cities that became hubs of learning and cultural exchange. These settlements, from the oases of Central Asia to the bustling markets of Samarkand and Bactria, became melting pots where people of different backgrounds could meet, negotiate, and collaborate. Thus, the Silk Road was not merely a trade route, but a living network connecting economies, societies, and ideas. Every caravan carried not just silk or spices, but also stories, beliefs, and innovations, knitting together the human experience in a way that would profoundly shape the history of Eurasia for centuries to come. Central Asia played a crucial role in the development and sustainability of the Silk Road. This vast region, encompassing deserts, steppes, and mountain ranges, was initially inhospitable for long-distance travel. However, strategically located oasis cities transformed it into a thriving corridor of trade and culture. Cities like Samarkand, Bactria, and Merv became bustling hubs where caravans could rest, resupply, and exchange goods. These oases were lifelines in the arid landscape, offering water, food, and shelter, and they quickly developed sophisticated infrastructures including caravanserais, inns designed specifically for traveling merchants and their animals. The prosperity of these cities depended on the constant flow of commerce. Merchants brought silk from the east, spices from India, and precious metals and glassware from the west, creating markets that were diverse and cosmopolitan. Beyond commerce, these centers became melting pots of ideas. Scholars, artists, and religious figures traveled along the Silk Road, spreading Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and later Islam across Central Asia. This cultural diffusion enriched the region, blending artistic styles, architectural techniques, and philosophical thought from multiple civilizations. Central Asian merchants also played a key role as intermediaries. They facilitated trade between distant empires, navigating complex political landscapes, negotiating safe passage, and often acting as translators and cultural mediators. Their expertise allowed goods to travel thousands of miles efficiently, while simultaneously ensuring that knowledge, technologies, and artistic traditions crossed borders. Over centuries, these cities not only became economic powerhouses but also centers of learning and diplomacy, proving that the Silk Road was as much about human connection as it was about material exchange. Traveling the Silk Road was far from easy, and merchants faced immense dangers along the route. Harsh deserts, like the Taklamakan and the Gobi, tested even the most seasoned caravans. Temperatures could swing from freezing cold at night to scorching heat during the day, while sandstorms and limited water sources made survival a daily struggle. In addition, the high mountain passes such as the Pamirs and the Tian Shan Range were treacherous, with narrow trails, steep cliffs, and the constant threat of avalanches or rock slides. Despite these obstacles, caravans continued to brave the journey, driven by the immense value of the goods they carried and the prestige of successful trade. Banditry was another persistent danger. Remote stretches of the route offered little protection, and merchants were frequent targets for raiders seeking valuable silk, spices, or precious metals. To defend themselves, caravans often traveled in large groups, employing guards and forming alliances with local tribes. Diplomatic arrangements with local rulers were also common, allowing safe passage through politically unstable regions. Moreover, merchants had to navigate not only physical risks, but also political complexities, as empires rose and fell along the route. Trade agreements, taxes, and tariffs varied, requiring constant negotiation and adaptation to survive economically. Despite the perils, the rewards were substantial. Successful traders could achieve wealth beyond imagination, while cities along the route prospered from taxes, markets, and the cultural influx brought by travelers. Stories of danger, heroism, and triumph spread along the Silk Road, adding to its legendary status and inspiring future generations of merchants and explorers. The challenges of the journey, while daunting, were integral to the Silk Road's identity, shaping its networks, influencing its routes, and forging the resilience and ingenuity that defined its long history. One of the most profound impacts of the Silk Road was the exchange of culture and religion, which traveled alongside goods. While merchants carried silk, spices, and precious metals, they also transported ideas, beliefs, and customs. Buddhism, for example, spread from India into Central Asia and China, facilitated by traveling monks who established monasteries along caravan routes. These monasteries not only served religious purposes but also became centers of learning, preserving sacred texts, teaching philosophy, and fostering art and literature. Christianity and Zoroastrianism also traveled these routes, reaching regions far beyond their origins. Merchants and missionaries introduced new rituals, architectural styles, and social practices, leaving lasting influences on local cultures. Later, the spread of Islam brought further transformation, integrating trade networks with religious communities and establishing new legal and educational systems that promoted scholarship and intellectual exchange. Artifacts such as sculptures, paintings, manuscripts, and coins reveal the blending of styles and ideas across regions, showing how exposure to distant cultures inspired innovation and creativity. Languages, too, were exchanged and adapted. Multilingual traders and interpreters facilitated communication, while writing systems and calligraphy traveled alongside merchants, influencing literature and documentation practices across empires. Music, storytelling, and cuisine evolved as people adopted new influences from travelers, creating a dynamic cultural fusion. In essence, the Silk Road became a conduit for human connection, demonstrating that the movement of goods was inseparable from the movement of ideas, beliefs, and culture. Its legacy is a testament to how commerce can unite societies and shape civilizations across centuries. The western terminus of the Silk Road connected with the Roman Empire, which played a significant role in fueling demand for Eastern goods. Roman elites were fascinated by Chinese silk, which became a symbol of luxury and social status. Silk garments adorned the wealthy, and the fabric was even used as diplomatic gifts to strengthen political alliances. The high value placed on silk and other exotic goods drove merchants to organize larger caravans and establish more reliable trade routes, despite the distance and dangers involved. Trade with Rome was not limited to silk. The Silk Road facilitated the movement of spices, gemstones, glassware, and fine art. Roman glassmakers, for example, developed techniques inspired by Persian and Syrian craftsmanship, while Western demand encouraged Chinese and Central Asian producers to refine their goods to meet foreign tastes. Additionally, the flow of silver and gold into the East created a complex economic system, where currency, barter, and trade credit intertwined, establishing one of the earliest forms of global commerce. The Roman connection also influenced cultural exchange. Knowledge of geography, cartography, and foreign cultures expanded, and artistic motifs traveled from west to east and back again. Roman coinage, inscriptions, and art can be found along Silk Road sites, illustrating the profound influence of Western demand on the development of trade networks. This westward appetite for luxury goods ensured that the Silk Road remained a dynamic and prosperous corridor for centuries, connecting continents and shaping the course of world history. The Silk Road was not only a channel for trade and religion but also a critical conduit for technological and scientific knowledge. Innovations in agriculture, astronomy, medicine, and engineering traveled alongside merchants, profoundly influencing civilizations across continents. Chinese papermaking techniques, for example, spread westward to Central Asia and eventually reached the Islamic world and Europe, revolutionizing the way information was recorded and disseminated. Similarly, advancements in metallurgy, textile production, and irrigation systems were shared and adapted along the trade routes, improving productivity and craftsmanship in regions far from their origin. Medical knowledge was another area of exchange. Herbal remedies, surgical techniques, and medical texts traveled from China, India, and Asia and Persia, enabling doctors and scholars to expand their understanding of the human body and treatments for disease. Astronomical observations and mathematical concepts were exchanged between cultures, enriching calendars, navigation, and timekeeping. Even military technologies such as the use of crossbows, stirrups, and new types of armor spread along the Silk Road, influencing tactics and defense strategies across empires. Artistic techniques also traveled, including painting, pottery, and sculpture. Motifs and styles from one region often appeared in distant lands, reflecting a fusion of cultural aesthetics. This technological and intellectual exchange created an environment where human knowledge could grow collectively, demonstrating that the Silk Road's impact extended far beyond commerce. It became a network that connected minds as well as markets, leaving a legacy of innovation that shaped the development of civilizations for centuries. The Mongol Empire, which rose to prominence in the 13th century, had a transformative effect on the Silk Road. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his successors, the Mongols unified vast territories across Asia, creating a level of political stability previously unseen. This unification made trade along the Silk Road safer and more efficient, as caravans could traverse formerly hostile regions without constant fear of attacks. The Mongols actively encouraged commerce, offering protection to merchants and ensuring that trade routes were well maintained. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, facilitated unprecedented cultural and technological exchange. Merchants, scholars, and artisans moved freely across the empire, bringing with them goods, ideas, and knowledge. The Mongols themselves were keen on adopting useful innovations from conquered territories, including advanced military technology, administrative techniques, and artistic traditions. This period saw a significant increase in the movement of silk, spices, precious metals, and luxury goods between East and West, further enriching the connected civilizations. Additionally, the Mongol era strengthened the network of cities along the Silk Road. Key centers such as Samarkand, Bukhara, and Kashgar flourished under Mongol patronage, becoming vibrant hubs of trade, culture, and learning. These cities hosted scholars, engineers, and artists from diverse backgrounds, facilitating the fusion of Persian, Chinese, Indian, and European knowledge. The Mongol period, therefore, represents a golden age for the Silk Road, demonstrating how political stability and encouragement of commerce can dramatically enhance the flow of goods, culture, and ideas across continents. While the overland Silk Road is often the most celebrated, maritime routes were equally vital in connecting East and West. Sea lanes extended the network beyond deserts and mountains, linking ports in China, India, Southeast Asia, Arabia, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Chinese junks carried silk, porcelain, and spices along these routes, while Indian and Arab ships transported pepper, gemstones, and other luxury goods. Maritime trade allowed for larger volumes of goods to be moved more efficiently than overland caravans could manage, supplementing the overland Silk Road and expanding the scope of commerce. Coastal cities like Guangzhou, Malacca, and Hormuz became bustling centers of trade, attracting merchants from diverse regions including Arabs, Persians, Indians, and eventually Europeans. These cities were cultural melting pots where languages, religions, and artistic traditions converged, just like in the inland oasis cities. The integration of maritime and overland routes created a comprehensive Silk Road network that ensured goods, ideas, and technologies could travel vast distances with remarkable speed and efficiency. Maritime routes also facilitated the spread of crops, culinary techniques, and scientific knowledge. For instance, the cultivation of sugar, citrus fruits, and cotton spread along these routes, altering diets and economies across continents. Navigational tools, shipbuilding techniques, and knowledge of monsoon winds enabled sailors to travel safely over long distances, demonstrating the ingenuity and adaptability of Silk Road participants. By combining land and sea, the Silk Road became a multidimensional network, transforming trade into a truly global enterprise long before the modern era of international commerce. The Silk Road profoundly influenced art and architecture across Eurasia, creating a unique blend of styles that reflected the movement of people and ideas. As merchants and travelers journeyed across regions, they brought not only goods but also artistic traditions and techniques. Buddhist sculptures and frescoes in Central Asia, for example, reveal a fusion of Indian, Persian, and Hellenistic influences, demonstrating how cultural exchange shaped visual expression. Temples, mosques, and palaces along the trade routes often incorporated elements from multiple civilizations, blending design principles, materials, and decorative motifs in innovative ways. Manuscripts, paintings, and textiles also traveled along the Silk Road. Chinese silk designs inspired Persian carpets, while Central Asian motifs influenced Indian art. Calligraphy, pottery, and jewelry reflected a cross-cultural dialogue, merging regional craftsmanship into shared visual languages. Even music and performance traditions were exchanged, creating hybrid cultural practices that enriched local societies. The presence of foreign artisans in major trade cities facilitated experimentation, innovation, and collaboration, leaving behind tangible evidence of intercultural synthesis that endures to this day. Through this artistic and architectural fusion, the Silk Road became more than a trade network. It evolved into a medium for human creativity. Cultural interactions along the route demonstrated that commerce could not only satisfy material needs, but also inspire aesthetic and intellectual growth. The blending of ideas and styles fostered a sense of shared heritage across vast distances, illustrating how the movement of people and goods shaped civilizations in profound and enduring ways. Religious exchange was one of the most significant aspects of the Silk Road, shaping spiritual life across Asia and beyond. Buddhism, originating in India, spread widely along the trade routes, reaching China, Korea, and Japan. Monks traveled with caravans, establishing monasteries, translating sacred texts, and teaching meditation practices to local communities. These monasteries often served multiple purposes, functioning as centers of worship, education, and hospitality for travelers, which further integrated religion into daily commerce. Christianity, particularly the Nestorian branch, also spread eastward along these routes, establishing communities in Central Asia and China. Zoroastrianism, Judaism, and later Islam moved along the Silk Road, interacting with existing belief systems and often blending practices in local contexts. Religious ideas were carried alongside commercial goods, and sacred artifacts, manuscripts, and icons traveled vast distances. This facilitated not only spiritual growth but also the transmission of knowledge, moral philosophy, and artistic traditions connected to religious practice. The movement of religion along the Silk Road also encouraged dialogue between civilizations. Pilgrims and scholars exchanged interpretations of texts, debated philosophical concepts, and translated works into new languages, contributing to the intellectual richness of the regions they visited. By enabling the coexistence and cross-pollination of multiple faiths, the Silk Road became a corridor not just for trade, but for the spiritual and intellectual evolution of countless communities, leaving a lasting legacy on world culture. Along the Silk Road, cities and trading hubs were not just commercial centers, they became crucibles of knowledge, scholarship, and innovation. Cities such as Samarkand, Bukhara, Kashgar, and Xi'an attracted scholars, artisans, and travelers from across continents. Libraries, schools, and observatories were established, providing spaces where ideas could be exchanged and preserved. Manuscripts in multiple languages circulated widely, allowing texts on astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy to reach audiences far beyond their place of origin. Caravanserais, the roadside inns that dotted the Silk Road, served as more than resting places for merchants. They were also venues for intellectual exchange. Travelers shared stories, trading techniques, and news from distant lands. Artisans taught each other skills in weaving, metallurgy, and ceramics, while scholars debated philosophy, translated religious texts, and recorded the natural sciences. This constant movement of knowledge contributed to an environment where human ingenuity thrived, creating an early network of global learning that connected East and West centuries before modern communication technologies existed. The role of these cities as knowledge centers also enhanced their cultural and economic significance. A city that could support scholars and artisans attracted more trade, creating a virtuous cycle of prosperity and intellectual development. The Silk Road, therefore, was not merely a conduit for goods. It was a living, dynamic system where commerce, culture, and knowledge were deeply intertwined, shaping the evolution of civilizations across Eurasia in ways that resonate to this day. The Silk Road had a profound economic impact on the civilizations it connected. The trade of silk, spices, precious metals, and other luxury goods generated wealth for merchants, cities, and empires alike. Local economies flourished as marketplaces expanded to accommodate foreign traders, and new professions emerged, including caravan organizers, translators, artisans, and financial intermediaries. The flow of goods encouraged specialization, as regions focused on producing items for which they had unique resources or expertise. Beyond material wealth, the Silk Road facilitated economic innovation. Systems of credit, trade contracts, and standardized weights and measures developed to ensure smooth commerce across vast distances. Banking and financial practices evolved as merchants needed ways to safely transfer money and manage risk. Cities along the Silk Road became hubs for economic experimentation, where ideas about trade, taxation, and resource management could be tested and refined. The legacy of the Silk Road extends far beyond economics. It created lasting connections between distant peoples, influencing language, art, architecture, science, and religion. The movement of goods was inseparable from the movement of ideas, shaping the cultural and intellectual landscape of Eurasia for centuries. Even after the decline of overland routes due to maritime trade and political instability, the Silk Road's imprint remained visible, reminding the world of the power of human curiosity, innovation, and collaboration across cultures. Although the traditional overland Silk Road eventually declined due to maritime trade, political upheavals, and shifting empires, its influence continues to shape the modern world. The connections forged over centuries laid the groundwork for globalization, demonstrating the benefits of cultural exchange, international commerce, and intellectual collaboration. Modern trade routes, international markets, and even cultural diplomacy can trace philosophical and practical roots back to the networks of the Silk Road. Today, scholars and travelers study ancient Silk Road sites to understand how commerce, technology, and ideas moved across continents. The artifacts, manuscripts, and architectural remnants preserved in museums and historical sites tell stories of ingenuity, resilience, and intercultural dialogue. Modern initiatives, such as China's Belt and Road Initiative, explicitly reference the Silk Road, aiming to revive the spirit of connectivity and exchange on a global scale. The Silk Road's legacy also persists in the arts, cuisine, language, and religious traditions of the regions it touched. From the spices in Central Asian markets to the artistic motifs found in European textiles, its influence is tangible and enduring. More than just a network of trade routes, the Silk Road stands as a testament to humanity's capacity for exploration, innovation, and connection. It reminds us that the movement of people, goods, and ideas can transcend borders, shaping civilizations and leaving an indelible mark on history, a mark that continues to inspire the present and guide the future.